to Diving into the Discourse. I'm your host, Carmen Ramos Chandler, and joining me today is Dr. Shyrea Minton.
Hello.
She is a professor of educational psychology and counseling. She happens to be chair of the department at the moment. And we are going to have a serious conversation. School, well, the 24-25 academic year is underway, and it's going to be a different year for the men and women who teach in our K-12 classrooms. It's going to be a different world for the children who are under their care and trying to learn. The ground has shifted. Friends they may have had last semester may have disappeared over the summer, or they lost their parents. Yeah. They've disappeared. You're teaching 7-year-olds or you're teaching 13-year-olds. How do you help children navigate this type of trauma and still get them to move forward in their academic pursuits?
Yeah, I think the first thing is the recognition that worlds have been turned upside down, right? As you mentioned, loss of family members, siblings, parents, friends, aunts, uncles, just everyone. Mm-hmm. For some of our most vulnerable population of students. And so it's critical to recognize that this is the reality that folks are facing, and acknowledging that is like the first place to begin, right? So that we recognize and we see. So that's through whether it's assemblies, whether it's just discussions in classrooms, to ensure that students see that those who are charged with their education, but not only their education, their social emotional development, health, their well-being, recognize what's happening to them, what's happening to their families. And so I think that's the first place to start, is just the recognition. Mm-hmm. Now, moving from that, I think it's critical for educators to understand that students who have experienced this type of trauma will often experience some type of lack of safety, lack of control. And so how are teachers, how are counselors, administrators creating spaces where students have the opportunity to really take some control of their life, right? So giving students small choices, whatever those may be, allowing them to show mastery of assignments, concepts in many different ways, instead of it only being, oh, it's this one thing. This is what you have to do, right? And also recognizing that students are going to need some time. They may need to step away. They may need to just get up from their desk and move, because whatever they experienced is present for them. It doesn't just go away when they walk through the school doors, right, at the beginning of the day. And so how are we ensuring that there is a space that's created for the students where they can step away, calm down? I like to think of like a calming corner, or just some place where they can go to really just recenter, refocus, and then rejoin the class, right? But that's also a choice. Giving them that choice, that opportunity to do so, can be so critical and so beneficial for the students.
We keep using the word students as I was talking to you, and but we forget these are children.
Yes.
They may have gone to school with little Johnny since preschool, Head Start, kindergarten, and now they're in 3rd grade, and they've been best friends all along. And the only way 7 and 8-year-olds can be best friends, it's the world.
Yep.
And then Johnny's gone because his parents are gone, or his dad is gone. We forget their children. How do we truly appreciate the impact that could have on that 7 or 8-year-old?
I think we do. I think, yes, I refer to the individuals as students. You're absolutely correct. These are children. And it's also important to acknowledge, though, that regardless of the age developmentally, chronologically, they have experienced something, a profound loss, which is why it's important for that recognition, for that presence, for those routines to be established for the child, because ultimately we want to show that there is care, there's concern for their well-being, there is concern for what is happening to them, right? Without that, then it really is just this, you forget everything that's happened to you before you come to school. When you're in school, you're only here to learn. But we know that students cannot process, they cannot learn if they are dysregulated emotionally. They just can't.
How does a teacher, a fourth grade teacher, a fifth grade teacher, a ninth grade teacher, do they talk about this should they talk about this in the classroom, or should they shy away?
No, I think this is part of the recognition, part of the acknowledgement. It is critical for students to feel seen, to feel heard, to believe that there is someone who recognizes that something profound has happened to them, that they have experienced a trauma. And so if we don't have the conversation, how are they supposed to know that the adults that they spend a majority of their time with every week get it? Get that something has happened. So that's that piece about acknowledging, recognizing, because without that, they won't know that this is a place where I can reach out. This is a place where I can go to experience some form of comfort, whatever that comfort may be. Because remember, the child may not actually know what it is they're seeking, what it is they need. And they're going to rely on the adults within their lives to provide that, whatever that may be. And so that's why I think it's critical to create a space where the student feels safe, where they feel like this is a place where I can go and express what's happening to me. And you can't create that space if you don't have the discussion, if you don't have the conversation. There's just no way.
In elementary school, how can a teacher, God, it even sounds like a parent might want to do this, or the guardian, create a calming corner or safe space? And then how does a child know when they can go there?
So there are very simple ways to do so. You just cordon off a corner in the classroom, maybe some beanbag chairs, or like tables with coloring materials. Coloring is a great stimulus, not only for children, but also for adults, to help just kind of take away whatever stressor that the person has experienced. It kind of takes them away from it, because they can only focus on the coloring, right? So things like that. So coloring tools, beanbag chairs, Play-Doh, a lot of these mindfulness techniques, because we want the person to be present in the moment. We, in essence, want to take them out of what they're experiencing so that they can recenter, refocus, feel a sense of calm. My bad. Feel a sense of calm, so that they can then ultimately re-engage with the lesson. How they know to use that is the start of the year. Have the conversation. Here's a space that has been created for you. Here's what I would like you to do. If you feel like you need to use it, quietly get up from your desk, walk over to the corner and engage. And then rejoin. Right? So that students, again, that's a small choice. That's a small choice that they have. They recognize, okay, I can use this. This is at my disposal if I need it. And when I need it, I know I can get up and go. I don't have to make a thing. I don't necessarily have to raise my hand. I don't have to put in a request. I can just get up and go. And I know that once I'm there, I might have a certain amount of time. So there might be a timer or something. There are lots of very quiet timers that don't have these loud alarms that a student can set. So they know that once that clock finishes ticking down, okay, they have to re-engage with the lesson, right? And so that's part of a routine that can be established for students. So these conversations definitely need to happen at the start of the academic year.
It sounds, in a way, with the lives being so out of control, you're giving them that little window of control.
Yes. Yes.
Is that important?
Yes. Because remember, the student, the child, the individual who's experienced some form of trauma, they may themselves wake up feeling like, whoa, this is just not a safe place. Like the world is not as as safe as I thought it was. I don't have control, right? And I mean, we talk about like philosophically, like control is an illusion, kind of thing. But at that developmental age, you don't necessarily recognize, okay, I don't have control. You're not confronted with situations where you are questioning control, right? Because, it's like mom and, whoever, parent, guardian, they are the ones who are helping me to navigate through the day, helping me to get where I need to go. Now this person is gone. Now I'm really out of control. What does that mean, right? Like for me. And so these are often questions that the individual will experience, that lack of safety, that loss of control, loss of agency. And so these small choices that we are affording the student is a way to help them regain some sense of agency, some small sense of control in their lives that feels very out of control at this moment.
What about for high school and middle schoolers? Life is hell when you're a teenager or about to be a teenager. Adolescence is not. It's filled with minds everywhere. But then you add the trauma of losing family members in an ice raid, or someone's grandfather going to go to work and never comes back and their car is discovered. And when I say this, it sounds like something out of some really bad dystopian novel, but this is reality.
This is happening.
This is happening. And when you become a teenager, you feel like you should be an adult. You're not, but you should be an adult. And that level of responsibility that comes with care for my family, but you're still a child. And you're in high school. And you have emotions. And you're in middle school. And boy, do you have emotions. How do teachers with those children in their care, how do they create a safe space?
Well, I think part of it is recognizing when the child, the adolescent, may need help. And so that's part of staying present, tracking what's happening in your classroom. How are students responding to different situations, different stimuli? Are you noticing things? Does this person have an aversion, for example, to touch? Are they startled by loud noises? Those are responses to trauma that we commonly see, and that identifies that this person may need additional intervention. And so part of it is understanding what is happening for the child so that you could be prepared to intervene when necessary. And so for the child, the adolescent who can't necessarily express all of the big emotions that they're having, you may see some shutting down behavior, some numbness that happens, some inability to articulate what's happening for them. And that's when the adults really do need to step in to have the conversation, refer to resources, refer to the school counseling team, refer to the school psychologist. If there are mental health professionals, licensed clinicians on campus that students have access to, submit a referral. Ask for someone to intervene on behalf of that student. Also, I think it's important to create the space in the classroom. And middle school and high school, it's maybe a little more challenging because they're moving periods. They're, not necessarily in one classroom all day, every day. And so the teachers only get to see a glimpse of what's happening. But even for that one period, paying attention to what's happening for the children, for the students in your room, I think is going to be critical. You can still create spaces. You can create spaces for peer support so that students recognize, hey, I may not be struggling with this or experiencing this, but how can I be a resource, right? And I think that's what starts at the ground level, like the universal interventions that can be created on school campuses. When we think about multi-tiered systems of support, things of that nature, where we have the universal intervention that goes out to everyone, and then you have a little bit more involved intervention, and then a little bit more intensive intervention for those level 3 or tier 3 services, right? And so how are we, not can we, because we can, how are we creating spaces throughout the school community, throughout the campus, where individuals know when I need this support, or I don't even necessarily know what I need, I know I can go here, right? I think that's a big part of it. And so taking the time to have those conversations, whether that's through, again, a full school assembly or having these individual talks in individual classrooms, which I think may be a little better because it's a little bit more intimate. Students are in certain periods and they may feel comfortable with certain teachers and peers, but creating the space so that the conversations can happen, right? That's going to be a big part of it.
Wow. I don't know if I want to be a teacher. I have two sisters who are school teachers, so I truly appreciate in more normal times, the workload of an educator is quite large. It's super heavy. Adding this on, I will say most of the educators I know are educators because they have a heart that's connected to a brain. It's not just willy-nilly. They are thoughtful, they are caring, and they are attached to their students. How do the teachers and the other educators in that environment, in that school, in that classroom, because even the janitorial services and oftentimes are partners in the education of a child, very much so. How do they maintain their sanity? Because the reality is, students they adored and they were hoping to see matriculate to the next grade or matriculate to middle school or matriculate to high school or someday see them graduate from high school and have that, I told you could do it, that told you so the only teachers get to have because they're accurate. How do they deal with this additional burden of creating safe spaces and being safe themselves for these children to talk to?
It's not an easy lift, first and foremost. And I think we need to recognize, I truly believe that teaching is a calling, that individuals who go in to teach students, regardless of the grade level, you have a calling to do that. And my hat's off to teachers, 100%. And now we're asking them also, just as you were saying, please also pay extra attention to what's happening with your students, what's happening in the classroom, right? But we're not necessarily saying, and also pay attention to what's happening with you. That's the piece that's missing, I think. And that's when we really need to have conversations around self-care. Self-care is still, I think it's better how we're framing it, how we think about it, but there is still a large swath of population that believes that self-care is in some way selfish because self is in the title. But in actuality, you have to care for yourself when you're doing the work of a teacher, when we're now asking you to also be mindful and understand what's happening what's happening to the students in your classroom. You're going to be affected. So I think there needs to be the recognition that you're going to have some type of response to what's happening to the students in your classroom. There's just no way around that. And so knowing that, how are you taking care of yourself, right? And I think you need to, part of self-care is just regularly checking in with yourself to understand, okay, how am I being affected by the situations that are unfolding day by day? Or, that was a really hard conversation that I had to facilitate around this type of trauma experience that a student might have experienced. Okay, and so how has that affected me? I think a lot of times what we don't do is we don't stop to check in. We don't stop to reflect what's happening. It's just go, right? I know I've got this upcoming. I know I've got this lesson to prepare for. I have, this school event to prepare for, and it's just week after week after week. And there's not really necessarily a lot of time to sit down and check in with yourself. And so when we think about how do I continue to be present, you can only continue to be present if you do that work on yourself. There is a such thing as being too affected to be effective, right? When you are overwhelmed and overcome by the feelings, the trauma that you are bearing of other people, the suffering of others, because students may likely see you as a trusted person, someone that they can talk to, they can confide in, they can rely on. They know you'll always be there. And that's a special bond that teachers create with their students, right? And that's not an easy thing to do, but it happens. And I think it speaks to what students, not just educationally, what they get out of going to school every day, but emotionally, developmentally, there is a large impact that teachers have on the students that they see day in and day out. And so recognizing that you are going to be oftentimes that person that the student decides, okay, I can confide in you about what's happening in my life. How do you stay present, grounded, so that you can receive that, right? And when you have a classroom of 30, 40, sometimes even more students that you see, and especially at the middle school and high school levels, because you're seeing a rotating, right? You're seeing so many students throughout the day, that can become very overwhelming. And so checking in with yourself, being mindful, what do I need to do? Sometimes it's taking a mindful moment. Just stop, pause, take a deep breath, understand what's happening for me. If I'm not in a place where I can necessarily confront and address what's coming up for me in this moment, okay, but I recognize that there's something so that I can move forward with having that addressed later. And sometimes it's, I'm in educational psychology and counseling. We train counselors, we train therapists and stuff. And so it's like, yeah, seeking therapy can be helpful. And if you are uncomfortable with pursuing therapy, are there trusted friends that you have? Are there trusted supports and support systems that you've developed where you can just, not necessarily, but unload or vent, but just be? Sometimes you don't have the ability to articulate all that is coming up for you. And so is there someone that I can call and I can just be with? Like, we can go grab a coffee and we don't have to talk about anything. And that is a way for me to decompress, emotionally regulate myself. There are so many ways that we can alter our state of being, we could do a whole podcast just on on that. But I think it's critical for educators really to pay attention to what's happening for them. Because without that, you can get to a place where you're just burnt out and you don't know how it happened. Burnout it's a tricky thing, but that emotional exhaustion, that toll, that just bearing the weight of all of that suffering from your students, maybe even from other individuals in your own family, you may be experiencing something similar to what many students are experiencing at this time.
That was my next question. We forget.
Right.
Los Angeles, Southern California, the state of California is a minority majority. The state, the county, the city, the region. So the trauma their students are undergoing, they themselves may be experiencing. I think of my sisters, and they pay attention to the news so that they are aware of the things that could impact their students. And they tell all of us who are, those, well, you and I are both in education, but they tell everybody to disconnect. But they feel a responsibility to their students to always be aware of what might be coming down and could impact them or their family members or their loved ones. How do educators, people in education, keep that balance? And it's not just in education, it's everybody in life at the moment. And to add that on, skin color or accent can get you stopped now. How do you have those conversations among your peers or with your students?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to that recognition that this is happening. This is our reality for the time being. And I mean, I have colleagues, I have friends who now carry their passports, who are of Latin descent, who carry their passports just in case, right? And I can't even imagine the amount of stress that one feels leaving the house, knowing that any moment they might be stopped for whatever reason, right? And you're right, there is, even though we talk about disconnecting and how, turning off technology, turning off the news can be so beneficial to one's mental health, when you feel responsible for others, right, especially in the case of teachers, it's really hard to disconnect. As you mentioned, you stay engaged. You want to know what's happening so that you can be prepared in case a student comes in and is, this is my neighborhood and this is what happened, right? And you don't want to feel like that's coming out of left field, like, oh, I had no idea, right? You want to be the one who the person can come to and you're prepared with some type of response or some type of action, how you can help, right? Even still, taking moments just to breathe and recognize what is happening for me in this moment as the teacher can be so critical so that you can stay engaged for those students, right? And so it can be anything really. What brings you joy? Identifying what brings you joy, what brings you happiness, and intentionally doing that thing, whatever that thing may be, so that you can continue to stay engaged and to stay connected.